With multimedia applications growing in popularity, coaxial cables and connectors are also coming back in style, so to speak. Before we had twisted pair cable or fiber optic cable, we used coax. In fact, coax was the only thing that we had at the beginnings of Ethernet. But very few businesses use coaxial cable for their computers these days. However, coaxial cables are still used because they're used by cable TV companies and for cable modems for home installations. So you should be familiar with the terms RG6, RG58, RG59. These are types of coax that are used. RG6 is a little bit thicker and has a little bit less of a resistance than RG58 or 59. Typically 58 is used for computers, 59 is used for cable companies. But there are many different ways to use coax for the new installations. The main thing that you should be familiar with is that coax is a means of connecting both for cable TV as well as for cable modems provided by internet service providers. The connector that these cables use is called a BNC connector. It depends on who you believe as to where that came from. Some people say it stands for British Naval Connector because the British Navy used these in their early communications. And some people say it stands for Bayonet Nut Connector, since that's sort of the way that it goes together. But you should just be familiar with the fact that coaxial cables are connected with BNC connectors. Another type of cable that we should be familiar with is the unshielded twisted pair cable. We briefly spoke about that in the earlier training, but there are new types of unshielded twisted pair, category 5E and category 6, which are designed to carry the higher bandwidths, the gigabit per second bandwidths. And they still connect with the RJ45 connector, which has 4 pairs of wires. Each wire has its own purpose, and we can put these things together. We could buy these called patch cables if it's just a straight through cable to connect. But you should be familiar that the unshielded twisted pair is by far the most common means of connecting computers together within corporate networks. But for the companies that can afford it, many companies are moving toward fiber optic cable. Fiber optics allow us to transmit signal further and with less distortion than any other type of cable. They're also completely immune to any electromagnetic interference, since the signal is actually light. And there are 2 different types of fiber optic transmission. There's single mode and multi-mode. Single mode transmits on a single fiber, and it's done with multiplexing, digital multiplexing, and it's an expensive solution, but it can travel great distances. Multi-mode is a mesh of wires. It costs less, but it doesn't have the performance that single mode has. So it depends on how much money a company has, and sometimes companies will use a mixture of single mode and multi-mode. They also use a mixture of connectors. A couple of connectors you might be familiar with are ST and SC. Those are the most common of fiber optic connectors. An ST connector is the type of connector which is sort of a push-on and then pull-off connector, whereas an SC is sort of a bayonet connector similar to the BNC connectors used with coaxial cable. But as far as details about fiber optics for an A+ certification test, probably don't need to know them. Just know that the fiber optic solution is completely immune to electromagnetic interference since it is light. And know that fiber optic is going to be a solution that can transmit great distances with very low distortion, but it's going to be the most expensive option as well. So this is the information for new cables and new connectors that I would know for the test. In addition, you need to know some new information about internet connectivity, and we'll discuss that in our next section.